Hello everyone, this is Sam Johnson with Garden in a Box. Just wanted to say hello and I apologize for being a little bit late here. We had a very busy day and a very busy weekend up in Bemidji, but it seemed like everything went very well. So the things that we're going to cover, first off is engaging your participants, specifically kids is what I'll be talking about, but if you're working with adults um, or young adults, we can talk a little bit about that in the question section. Uh, Within that, we'll also be talking about tracking strategies for the participants. It won't be anything too revolutionary, just reminding you about doing attendance and encouraging participants to communicate with you about where they're coming from, etc. And the real meat of this is going to be talking about care and maintenance of the garden and boxes, things like watering and weeding, thinning, trimming, managing bugs, and also harvest schedules as well, because right now, since we're beginning, we really need to make sure that we're keeping track of the vegetables, keeping track of participants, because if we start off on the right foot with our tracking, it'll make it that much easier as we move more into the season on answering questions about when you're going to harvest and how big your plant should be and who's coming along in the garden as well. So first is a little bit of housekeeping. We've got a couple of pictures here from groups that were good enough to provide them to me. I've had a couple, maybe a dozen or so, who have responded with pictures. I will be needing those. That is one requirement, just so I can see how your box is coming along and make sure that everything's being planted and taken care of. I know especially with groups that have people coming and getting the boxes, sometimes they kind of go out the door and you're not exactly sure how the group is coming along. So just coming in and saying, hey, I want to take a picture of your box, see how it's coming along. It's a great positive way to make sure that everything is on the up and up, and people who have those boxes are following through with the planting. You'd be surprised how many just take the supplies and then they sit there and the participants are like, oh, do I plant now? Is this weekend good? So having the coordinator coming in and checking in is a good impetus to have them get a move on there. So let's talk a little bit about engaging kids and your participants. Just a couple of simple suggestions that I'm going to throw out there, and we can delve much more deeply into this if other people are using better techniques. But it's so important to give them an introduction to the garden. And when I'm talking about an introduction to the garden, I'm talking about sitting down or getting in a circle and having your garden there and really giving your participants an opportunity to be there with you as you talk through the garden and what to expect, and talk to them about what their interests are as well. This is the way that we're going to build connections with these participants. It's a way that we're going to make them feel like this garden is theirs, create some ownership of the garden, and really to start cultivating the joy and the love of gardening with that good first impression. So introducing yourself to them, introducing them to each other, talking with them about what the goal is for the garden. I know it might seem self-evident, but many people are using the gardens for different things, whether it's just an opportunity to get people outside, whether it's to introduce them to nutrition concepts, whether it's to introduce participants to biology or different types of plants and how we use them. Making that explicit right at the beginning is going to be really important to help people understand what the garden's about, and to then set up what your need is of them. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. So after you've introduced yourself and you've introduced the concept of the garden, what you're hoping to use it for, that first meeting when you're introducing the garden, you want to try and create some positive experiences as well. So thinking of activities to connect them to the garden, such as scavenger hunts, or giving them a plant that you are saying this is yours to take care of. Giving them activities to get a sense of what their knowledge or ability is. So if you have a little sheet that, and I'm going to find some of these for you too, but if you have a sheet that asks them to identify parts of the plant, or ask them to talk about different categories of fruits and vegetables, just to see where they're at coming in. That first visit is a great way just to get that information for yourself, so then you can use that moving forward through the summertime. And then lastly, the activities. If you're giving them a good experience, you're essentially encouraging them to come back. To see how their plants are going, to see other people that they've met after the first time. And you can really make that explicit too. If you're giving them a plant and asking them to plant and water it, you can say to them, if you can come back, this plant's going to need your help. So that really is a great way to engage with your participants, give them a fun, positive first experience. And just as an example, when you're introducing yourself, it doesn't have to be a list of facts. My name is, my age is, I'm from X, that sort of thing. You can talk about it in terms of a story and ask everybody else to tell their story as well. Especially with younger children, stories are such a great way to engage them, to draw them in. If you have a good gardening book, bring it with. Tell them a story of someone that they can connect with, whether it's a gardening book with a young child as the protagonist, or something that you ask them to create with pencil and paper. You say, sit down, tell your story. What's your favorite vegetable? Have you gardened before? Those sorts of things. It's a really great way for people to get to know each other that might be a little bit more palatable than your typical icebreaker. And I haven't tried this yet. I tried putting a couple of videos on here because after you've told your story, you can tell them the goal for gardening in a more interesting way than just saying, this is what we're going to be doing for the summertime. I had tried to put on that little 10-minute video of me putting together the garden in a box. If you think that is something that your participants would respond well to, you can just show that to them so that they can visualize what we're doing. And then the second video that I had put on here, and I'm just not seeing how to play it, and I apologize about that, is a time-lapse video of a seed turning into a plant. I'll send the link over to you. It's just on Google, but it's a beautiful video with the seed in a plastic bag, and you can watch as the roots come out, watch as it struggles to the surface of the soil, and the plant slowly grows up and out. It's a quick way to really show people this is what's going to happen this summertime, and you can be here to witness it. You can be here to enjoy it. There's many other examples too, and I'll be working to put them together and send them out to you so that you can use them for your participants. So in terms of materials that you could bring for the activities, I just spotted a couple here that I thought I'd bring up because I know there are a couple of categories that you coordinators have told me you're going to be focusing on. First off is teaching nutrition. A good way to get a base idea of what your participants are into is just doing a quick survey of vegetables. And this one was a general one that I found on one of the links that I had sent you previously, and I will follow up this presentation with all of these resources as well. And it doesn't ask them how much they know about any of these plants. It just says, do you like it? Have you never tried it? Do you not like it? And it's really judgment-free, and you can use that as a way to start a conversation with your gardeners. Next, in terms of activities, a scavenger hunt is always an easy way for people to feel a little more comfortable with their surroundings. You're encouraging them to touch, to feel, to walk around, to look. It's really giving them permission to make the space their own. This was just a simple one that I found from this Growing Gardeners website, and it's fairly basic, maybe 5 to 8 years of age. If they have the reading ability to do this on their own, otherwise you could pair them with an older child or an older coordinator who can talk through these questions with them. So now that we have them there and we've introduced the garden to them and we asked them to interact a little bit with it, the next thing that we'll be dealing with over the next month until we come back and talk in July is care and maintenance of the garden. So everybody received the tomato plant and they received the strawberry plant. I wanted to let you know, if you're worried about the size of the tomato plant, this is a determinate variety, so it should reach a certain size and then stop. It's not a tomato plant that just keeps growing and growing and growing over the summertime. The caveat on that is that we have very good fertilizer and we have very good soil, so that determinate size might be very large. With the strawberries and the bush cucumbers, I know that some of these strawberries have already been shooting out runners. If you wonder what a runner is, you'll notice in the strawberry box that it's got the plants right in the middle of it, but it's also got a vine kind of hanging out the side. You can go ahead and trim that back after you've planted and it looks like it's stable there. Because what's going to happen if you're unfamiliar with the strawberry plant is that that runner is basically a vine that goes out, and right when the end of it hits the ground, it'll start creating roots and it'll start popping up a couple of leaves and branches. And so especially this first year, we're going to have to keep an eye on that to make sure that it doesn't take over your box in years to come. The other thing about trimming back those runners, it's not just about taking over the box. As your plant is growing, it's basically deciding where its energy is going to and where its nutrients are going to as well. If you let a bunch of runners coming off your strawberry plant thinking, oh, I'm going to get a nice big strawberry patch, that's what I want. What the plant is doing is it's putting all of its energy into creating those leaves and runners and roots, and it's not putting as much energy towards creating fruit. And it's the same thing with the bush cucumbers as well. As the bush cucumber will grow, I think I saw on the tag that it's going to be about 5 feet of vine. So that's quite large. I'm hoping that you put it on the side of your box, and as it climbs up the tomato cage that I gave you, you can just train it to go out onto the fencing as well. Make sure that it doesn't take over the middle of your box there. But as any vining bush cucumber, regardless of how small it is, it's going to have a few choices, and you want to dictate what those choices are in terms of whether it's going to flower or vine. The same thing as with the strawberry. It's only got so much energy, and if you make sure that it's not vining out, it's going to be putting that energy towards the flowers and eventually the fruit as well. And then lastly, in terms of trimming, think of your kales and your basils, and I believe your collards as well. To an extent, your spinach and other leafy greens. You can take them after they've been established and they've stabilized. You can start trimming almost right away when those leaves get to a desired size. And the nice thing about the kale and the basil is that it'll do two things. First off, you're going to have greens very quickly that you can eat and you can enjoy with your participants. So they're going to get rewarded for their care of the garden very quickly. Secondly, as you snip those off, the plant is going to be putting the energy that would have growing that leaf or that stem towards other parts of the plant. So especially when it gets hot, a lot of these leafy greens are going to start focusing on creating flowers and creating seeds so that they can drop them before the heat overcomes them. So if you are diligent on clipping off the older, more established branches without overwhelming the plant, you're going to be in a good spot in terms of prolonging the harvest that you could get from that plant. And then lastly, thinning. Everybody, of course, had their 3 varieties of seeds. And I want to reiterate now that I have everyone here that those varieties of seeds, the packs are quite a bit bigger than what we needed for one go at the garden. So if you only did a half of them and are going to use another half for the fall harvest. I hope that you've considered that, and if you haven't, I will let you know. Don't use all the seeds there. You can use them in the fall. You can save them even for next year. But if you've planted them and they're starting to come up and you're getting a little overwhelmed, make sure that you check out the seed package to see when it recommends that you start thinning that seed, what height. And remember, as you're seeing these plants come up, I know that we get excited about all of them. We want them all to survive, but you have to think of the future of the plant. If they're too close together, just got to be brutal about that and take out the ones that you think have the least likelihood of surviving, and then eat the leftovers. With a lot of these plants, one good example is the snow peas, the snap peas. They're very, very tasty plants that you can enjoy in a salad. And even if you don't have the peas there, the greens are delicious and very good. So don't feel like you just have to throw that away. Okay? Okay. And then lastly, and this has really kind of come up over the last week or so, make sure that you're thinking about your watering schedules as well. At the very least, you're watering in the late afternoon or morning. The only consensus that I saw between the two of those is that you definitely don't water in the early afternoon or late morning, of course, because you throw that water on the ground and it's more likely to evaporate than it is to get down to where the roots are so that the plant can enjoy them. I know also that watering right at dusk isn't a good thing, because then the water just sits there overnight, and it could, depending on how close together your plants are, contribute to disease and pest issues. So if you remember to talk with your participants about watering methods, it really is kind of an art, in my opinion, of trying to be patient enough with the plant and with the soil that you're working with, so that you're not watering it so heavily that it's all just running off and nothing's getting into the soil, and you're not just watering it so lightly that you're only really getting the top inch or so. So with your participants, especially if they have their own gardens, you're not gardening with them, talk with them about some good watering methods to make sure that they understand what it means to give it a good deep soak without washing away the soil. Now that we're getting into June and everybody has their boxes, I didn't provide this to you, but if you have access to dried leaves or seedless straw, even some extra compost or some newspaper, think about mulching as well. It will prolong those waterings, so that if you only are able to come and check out how your participants are doing twice a week or what have you, the mulch will make sure that those plants are surviving and they're benefiting from that watering that much longer while they're establishing themselves. Mulch is another way, if you're doing it right now, that you're going to be able to suppress weeds so that they're not going to become an issue later in the season either. And as the seeds are coming up, I hope that you marked your rows. Just one quick note about the weeds. I know that it can be exciting to see a plant that maybe you're not familiar with, but at the end of the day, they're going to be competing with your plants for water, for sun, for food. Next, insects. So things like cutworms and squash vine borers and slugs. Not only will I give you kind of a list of common insects to watch out for, but a couple of methods that don't involve pesticides to be able to take care of them. You know, it's inevitable they're outside, and knowing the difference between ones that are dangerous and ones that are beneficial is really going to go a long way towards making sure that you have healthy plants throughout the summer. A lot of you got the fencing to try and keep your squirrels and your rabbits out of the box. I've heard others talking about having issues with deer as well. In the information that I'll send you, I'll have a couple of suggestions, like pinwheels that you can put up so that you have something moving there that'll scare away some of the smaller critters. But it's kind of a tricky subject because with the fencing, of course, if you were to put deer fencing around your garden, how in the world would your participants be able to enjoy that? So I know that's a debate that we've all had as I've been offering up that fencing, but it's tough because on the other side of it, you know, you watch a lot of these plants fruiting and maturing, and right when it's about ready to harvest, what happens? Of course, other animals have had eyes on that harvest too and jump in there and take care of it. I can't tell you how many heartbreaking stories I've heard about watermelons disappearing the day before people are about to pick. And then lastly, diseases are much more difficult to take care of. They're much more insidious, but there are ways to address them, and really it's just attention to the garden. Whether it's you or your participants, it can be a lot to ask them to be out working in the garden every day because there's only so much to do, or maybe they just don't have the time. But just reminding them, you know, if you go out there and you keep an eye on it, then there's going to be that many less surprises. If you just go out there and take 30 seconds to check it over, and look at each plant and see what's going on, and tell them what to look for. Are there holes in the leaves? Is there discoloration in the leaves? Could it be a fungus? Could it be a virus? Tell them to go out with the camera, take a picture of it, send it to you. If you don't understand or see what the problem is, you can send it back to me, and we can look it up here too. That's one way that I can help you as well. Okay? Okay. Well, it's almost 7:30, so I'll try and go quickly through the rest of these. They're really just talking about ways that you can record the garden in boxes, a couple of different methods, keeping track of all that is going on. The most simple way to put it is keep a journal. There are many things that you could include in there, whatever your capacity is and whatever your intent is for the garden. But some basic ones is, when did you plant or seed the garden? When do you anticipate the harvest to happen? Just look on the tags or the back of the seed packet to see when you can anticipate that. If you have time to jot down when rainfall happens, it'll be that much easier for those times when you're thinking to yourself, oh geez, when do I need to go out and water right now? I don't really have the time. Let me just check and see when the last rain was. Okay, we should be fine. And then those pests and where you planted your plants, because even if we have the tags there, sometimes they wash away in a rain or what have you. So having a picture of that is really beneficial. I'd also suggest recording a participation calendar. So that really is, if you have formal programming around your garden, if you have a book that has a date, what you did, who was there. If you're starting that now and you're able to keep it going through the rest of the season, that's a really great bounty of information that'll give you feedback on who really latched in, or perhaps what they came for, and what they did like and what they didn't like. If you have it written down, it's that much easier to reflect on this season and prepare for next season. And this also includes failures and successes. You know, if you're asking your participants, what are you liking about this? What are you not liking about this? If you take 5 minutes after you're done with programming to write down what you heard, it's that much easier at the end of the season. This is just an example of a garden calendar. This one is from the U of M extension, so all you extensions people out there, if you recognize this, thank you for it. It's very nice. And then this is a more specific example of a strawberry plant. It just has a list of things to do. You can find these online, and I'll be providing this one to you as well. But if this is something that you can get into your participants' hands, it's a good way for them to really be able to visualize what the season's going to look like and what they can expect coming down the pipe. So that's it's one more way to kind of loop them in and say, this is what we're going to need from you, and these are sorts of things, activities that we're going to be doing over the summertime. And then lastly, if you have your participants coming in, you've got formal programming, or perhaps you just want them to be able to keep track of what they're doing. Again, with the strawberries, it's just a quick schedule of tasks, planting, watering, weeding, harvesting, etc. And if you're wanting to keep track of that, I would love to have that information. So if you have the capacity to do that, just writing things like on that first one there, planted, you know, May 17th, and who was there? Sam, Vicky, etc. Right? Just something simple like that. I could send you an Excel spreadsheet. I'll send you a PDF too if you want to be able to just print it out and write into it if you have a folder, what have you. But it's an easy way. Wednesday night, John did the watering, right? To keep track of what's being done in the garden and where the plants should be at. So next steps for your gardens, just go out about 6 to 8 weeks and make sure you sprinkle another cup of the sustain on the top, because right now those plants, as they're establishing themselves, are using quite a bit of that fertilizer. So you want to make sure that they have the necessary fertilizer when they start to fruit in the next month or two. And then lastly, keep in mind that we have site visits beginning June and last week of June and the beginning of July. I'll have times that you can sign up for me to come up and visit your garden and see how things are going. This really is just a way for me to connect with you after the gardens have gone in and make sure that as we get started on this season, you feel supported, and just a little bit of FaceTime so that we can talk about the garden and what you're trying to do, and I can give you more specific support that fits your program in particular. Okay, well, I guess I will call it now. Thank you all so much. I hope that was helpful. I love feedback on the PowerPoint. This is with a lot of the new materials that you have provided me, and I'm doing my best to try and turn them around quickly and get what I find to be the most compelling of it back into your hands so that you can use it for your programming. So if you see stuff that you like or see stuff that you think could be presented differently or used in a different way, you let me know, and we can really make this summer successful together. Thank you all so much, and I will see you at the end of June and early July.